Hello, I'm Simon Gersten, and I'm joined by Mila Barbuto, Josh Kardon, and Sabrina Leftoff. Today we will be discussing different topics dealing with the Second Industrial Revolution. Some of them include the advancements in technology, the hazards of industrial life, reactions to industrialization in different areas, the comparison between capitalism and socialism, and many more interesting topics. Stay tuned.
Developments in communication and transportation influenced rapid social and economic changes into the 20th century. The need for massive industry was obvious in order to reach California's port cities such as San Francisco and to expedite the extraction of gold from the mines. Railroad tracks would need to be laid across the plains to reach the Pacific and open up trade networks. During this time, cars were also invented, which helped to aid the development of transportation. After the invention of steam power and the cotton gin by Eli Whitney in 1793, cotton could only be shipped from the American South by New England ships to the vast textile factories of Great Britain, producing a reverse triangle trade around a single global commodity. The telegraph was then created, which contributed to the extent of global interactions through communication to convey messages. When technology improved, it then allowed for more food and supplies to be conveyed to and from everywhere, which allowed for more money to be brought into England. Then, this is what destroyed the cotton industry, which then caused more people to move to the city, which in the end led to more workers within the factories. During this time, steel was a major factor in what sparked the beginning of the Second Industrial Revolution. Steel began to replace iron and was being used for innovations such as construction products, industrial machines, railroads, ships, weapons, and many other items. It also made it possible for rail lines to be built, which further spread transportation. Before electricity was brought into the Second Industrial Revolution, things like candles and gas lamps were being used to light homes and factories, as well as most activities were being done during the daytime to make things easier. Great Britain was the first to utilize a new implement of electricity. They installed a public power station, which made it possible to power an area from just one station. More innovations came along, such as the telephone in 1876 and the light bulb in 1879, as well as transportation such as electric railroads. Electric streetcars began to replace horse-drawn carriages in 1880, as well as airplanes in 1901. The first radio waves were sent across the Atlantic Ocean. Chemicals played a large part in the Second Industrial Revolution, as the British made the first major discovery, which was in synthetic dye. Later on came the discovery of dynamite, which revolutionized construction and mining industries. Ammonia allowed for progress in the making of fertilizers, soaps, explosives, and other products.
Many steps to become the industrial rival of Great Britain. Germany industrialized early, but not effectively as it was not unified due to a power struggle. Eventually, though, Otto von Bismarck won the power struggle and the German Confederation was formed, uniting the German states. This unification provided the basis for the growth of industry. This led to the institution of new economic and industrial policies, which eventually led to rapid industrial growth. The economy was also boosted after reparations paid by France after losing the 7 Weeks' War. In conjunction, a large railroad network was created running through the entire country. Eventually, Germany became the center of activity for all European businesses. The creation of new railroads also increased the demand for steel and coal, and it turns out Germany is rich in steel and coal. The Ruhr Valley in Germany made Germany the foremost coal producer in Europe. A large steel industry also began to develop following the building of these railroads. New policies were also implemented to change the educational curriculum to place emphasis on industry, producing more and better scientists, which resulted in more advancements being made. Another advantage Germany had over Britain was that banks were more confident lending money to them and would not lend money to Britain because they had a fear of not being paid back. Germany promoted industry in several ways, as Otto von Bismarck implemented policies that drove up the cost of foreign goods and made German goods of higher value. The government supported all industries, including trade, because it wanted to maintain prosperity in all parts of the empire. Regional and local governments also opted to support their own industries when the national government did not act, associated with industrial life, which had great effects on people at this time in the industrial world. One of the big hazards was pollution. So one of the forms of pollution was air pollution, which was essentially deadly clouds of smog that killed thousands of people from respiratory diseases and cholera, typhus, and typhoid, which are bacterial infections. Water pollution also intensified as there was not a lot of sanitation, so rivers eventually became a waste basket for people. Overcrowding was also a problem as more and more people came to work into factories. They were shoved into tenements, which is a very small apartment. These tenements were all clustered together. There are about 800 people living per acre in the city. So due to this, the spread of disease increased and so did the death rate. Poor working conditions were also a big hazard. Working conditions were horrible and wages were extremely low. Unskilled workers often worked about 14 to 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, for $8 to $10 a week, which is about 10 cents an hour, but women received a fraction of that at about 3 cents an hour. All this was because owners were very satisfied with their profits, and there was such a high supply of people in need of work. Some more problems associated with the factories was the fact that working conditions weren't very safe. The only light available was sunlight shown through windows. Machines also spat out smoke. Workers often came out filth at the end of every day. There were also minimal safety precautions, which resulted in many accidents and often death. Child labor also had many hazards, as many children had deformities due to lack of exercise and sunlight. They worked simpler, less skilled jobs, but were still often injured by accidents with machinery.
Both capitalism and socialism were very big ideologies in the 19th century. Capitalism was owned by private firms, and socialism was owned by the government. The income of capitalism was determined by the market forces. So if you were selling stuff a lot, you'd be making a lot more money. But in socialism, everybody made around the same amount of money. Prices of capitalism determined by supply and demand. Socialism had price controls. This meant that no matter how much an item was getting sold for, it would always be the same. The problems with capitalism included inequality, market failure, and some companies even had monopolies of things, of certain aspects. Some advantages, though, were a very dynamic economy, incentives for innovation, and economic growth. Socialism had problems where there were very few incentives for those growths, but it did promote equality, and it attempted to overcome market failure. Another problem with socialism was that it had very high taxes, while capitalism had low taxes. This led to a lot of people not liking socialism, although they did try to balance it out with a healthcare that is provided by government. Meanwhile, capitalism doesn't have that. But a lot of people did not like the taxes that they would have to pay in socialism.
One of the major impacts of the Industrial Revolution was the effect it had on the lives of women. Before, women had more of a limited household job, such as raising children, cleaning, and cooking. However, the traditional role for women began to change as the Industrial Revolution unfolded, such as the impacts of the Agricultural Revolution and enclosure movement, and forced many small farmers off of their land. This caused many people to migrate from rural areas to the urban centers in search of work in the newly established factories and mines. Also, women were not valued the same as men in the workplace, and were often paid much less than men. Education changed during the Industrial Revolution. In the beginning, poor children couldn't afford the prices to go to school, as school was not yet free in Britain. But then, slowly, school became compulsory, and poorer class children could go to school. And many acts and unions took part in sponsoring of improving the schools in Britain. It changed the entire country because the country had more school children and adults to work in better jobs and create better lives for the people in the next generation. More people could be educated better, and the entire country could be more advanced and develop more with a bettering civilization and economy. Throughout history, Labor unions have played a vital role in the relationship between workers and owners and have helped to improve conditions of working class people. The labor movement first began during the time period of the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century. At the time, working class people were often exploited by wealthy owners and treated horribly. The dominant ideology of the Industrial Revolution centered on individualistic values such as classical imperialism and the laissez-faire capitalism. Both of these systems promoted the idea that the government should play as little as a role as possible in the economic lives of people. Out of this emerged different socialist movements that focused on improving the lives and conditions for industrial workers. Workers formed and used unions in order to protest for a variety of things, including shorter hours of work, higher rates of pay, safe working conditions, basic education, and health care. Industrialization led to the imperialism for several reasons. One of those things was the need for resources. Industrialized countries found they were able to obtain cheaper resources from their colonies than from other countries. Another factor showing how industrialization contributed to imperialism is that the industrialized countries needed places where they could sell their products. The colonies were a great place for these countries to sell their finished products. The industrialized countries knew they could rely on their colonies to buy the finished products made in their industries. This helped promote imperialism, and having colonies allowed a country to protect its world trade. Having colonies allowed these countries to have bases around the world where their ships, both military and commercial, could stop, refuel, and resupply. The Industrial Revolution impacted the world in a major way, through advancements in new industries, creating the state of Germany, which became the industrial rival of Great Britain, advancements in transportation and communication, impact on trade, the hazards of industrial life, women's suffrage, public education, and labor movements, the formation and comparison of capitalism and socialism, and lastly, the impact industrialization had on imperialism. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you enjoyed.